I grew up enchanted by the magic my grandmother created in her tiny kitchen. Each morning, the warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries would weave through our modest apartment, drawing neighbors like moths to a flame. Her hands, weathered yet masterful, could transform the simplest ingredients into creations that brought joy to everyone lucky enough to taste them. "Remember this, Emma," she'd often say, kneading dough with rhythmic precision. Good food isn't just about taste. It's about creating memories. Her words stayed with me long after she passed away, leaving behind a well-loved recipe book filled with her handwritten notes and secrets. I was 16 at the time, but I knew then what I wanted my life to be. 10 years later, I had graduated from culinary school and spent countless hours honing my craft in various bakeries. Every paycheck went straight into my dream fund, inching me closer to opening my own bakery. The journey wasn't easy. Double shifts left my feet aching, my hands raw, but I never wavered. I had a vision. That's when I met James. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and he walked into the bakery where I worked, seeking refuge from the downpour. His damp suit and ASU tag gave him a disheveled charm, but it was his smile that lit up the room. "Whatever smells so good, I'll take two," he said, running a hand through his wet hair. I had just pulled my signature lavender honey croissants from the oven. "You're in luck," I said, placing one on a plate. "First one's on the house." He took a bite, his eyes widening in delight. "This is amazing. Please tell me you're not married." I laughed at his boldness. "Is that your way of asking me out?" "Only if it's working," he replied with a grin. James was unlike anyone I ever met, kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my dreams. When I told him about my plans to open my own bakery, he didn't dismiss them as far-fetched like others had. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions and offered encouragement. Our relationship blossomed quickly. 6 months later, we were discussing marriage. That's when I met his family, and everything changed. Patricia James's mother was the embodiment of old money and high society. Her perfectly styled hair, designer wardrobe, and air of superiority made me feel out of place from the start. As the property manager of Crystal Mall, one of the city's most prestigious shopping centers, she wielded her status like a weapon. "So you're a baker," she began during our first dinner together, sipping her wine. "Yes," I said eagerly, determined not to let her rattle me. "I've been saving to open my own bakery." She laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the room. "Oh, darling, do you know how many small businesses fail in their first year? Especially now. James, surely you can help her find something more realistic." James squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, Emma is incredibly talented. She knows what she's doing." "Of course she does," Patricia replied, her smile dripping with condescension. "But wouldn't you rather have a wife who can attend charity galas and board meetings? Someone who fits our world." Her words stung, but I didn't respond. James's father, Robert, quickly changed the subject. A tactic I later learned was his go-to for avoiding confrontation. Despite Patricia's disdain, James and I married 6 months later in a small ceremony. It was far from the grand affair Patricia had envisioned, and she made her disappointment known at every turn. At the same time, I was quietly working toward my bakery dream. A chance meeting with Marcus Sterling, a prominent real estate developer, changed everything. Impressed with my business plan and vision, Marcus offered to invest in my bakery, providing the capital to launch not just a small shop, but a high-end bakery and cafe concept with room to grow. What neither James nor Patricia knew was that Marcus owned Crystal Mall, where Patricia worked. When my application for a space crossed her desk, she dismissed it out of hand. "A bakery here," she scoffed. "This is a luxury mall, not some roadside stand." What she didn't know was that Marcus had already approved my tenancy. Her rejection was merely a formality. 2 weeks later, construction began on Sweet Heritage in the heart of Crystal Mall. Patricia's fury was palpable when she discovered her veto had been overruled, but there was nothing she could do. On the eve of the grand opening, she stopped by, her expression a mix of disdain and smugness. When this fails, and it will fail, don't expect James to pick up the pieces, she said, her tone cold. I smiled, holding back the truth. Thank you for your concern, Patricia. Care for a coffee? We're testing the machines. The next morning, Sweet Heritage opened its doors to a crowd of eager customers. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air, and the elegant decor showcased the perfect blend of tradition and modernity. By noon, we had sold out, and glowing reviews from food critics began pouring in. Patricia's disapproval was no match for the bakery's success. But as she stormed off that morning, unaware of Marcus's involvement, I couldn't help but feel a small victory. This wasn't just about proving her wrong, it was about proving myself right. As I stood in my dream space, my grandmother's worn recipe book tucked into my apron pocket, I knew this was only the beginning. The situation reached a boiling point at the mall's monthly tenant meeting. Patricia had scheduled it during our busiest morning hours, forcing me to choose between overseeing the breakfast rush or attending. Reluctantly, I sent Sarah to manage the shop and went to the meeting. As you can see from these charts, Patricia was saying as I slipped into a seat, foot traffic in the North Wing has become problematic. Certain establishments, she paused, her eyes locking on me, are causing congestion that disrupts our more established tenants. The boutique next door spoke up immediately. Actually, since Sweet Heritage opened, our sales are up 30%. Their customers shop while they wait for their orders. A ripple of agreement ran through the room. Patricia's face tightened as she tried again. There have been complaints about odors. You mean the smell of fresh bread. Someone interrupted with a chuckle. It's fantastic. My customers say it makes the whole mall feel cozier. What about? Patricia began, but Marcus's calm but firm voice cut her off. Sitting at the back, the mall's owner had been silently observing. I think we've heard enough. Sweet Heritage has exceeded expectations and boosted mall traffic. Perhaps we should focus on more pressing concerns, Marcus said. Patricia sat down abruptly, her lips pressed thin. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. I don't know how you fooled everyone, she hissed. But this won't last. You're not good enough for this mall, or for my son. Mom, James's voice startled her. He'd arrived to meet me for lunch. Patricia had immediately softened. James, darling, I was just expressing concern about the stress Emma must be under running a business like this. Surely you prefer her to have more time for family. The only stress I feel, I said evenly, comes from your constant interference. How dare you? Patricia snapped. I'm only thinking of my son's happiness. No, James interjected, his tone sharp. You're thinking of yourself. Emma has built something incredible. Why can't you just support her? Patricia's eyes glistened with well-timed tears. I see she's turned you against me. What kind of woman drives a wedge between a mother and her son? The kind who's transforming your entire mall, Marcus said, approaching Patricia. My office. Now, we watched them walk away. James shook his head. I'm so sorry, Emma. I didn't know she was being this awful. It's not your fault, I said, though a part of me wished he'd seen it sooner. Before I could say more, Sarah rushed up, breathless. Emma, the food critic's review is live. The review was everything we'd hoped for. Glowing praise for our innovative recipes, warm atmosphere, and excellent service. By evening, our shop was busier than ever, with new customers and even a few well-known food bloggers. Patricia didn't show up at the mall for several days. Gossip hinted at lengthy meetings with Marcus. I kept quiet, waiting for the right moment. That moment came Sunday evening at a family dinner. Patricia insisted on hosting to discuss some changes, she said cryptically. The meal was tense. Patricia picked at her food while Robert made awkward small talk. Finally, she cleared her throat. There have been developments at work, she began. James frowned. What's going on? Mr. Sterling is making organizational changes, she said, her voice tight. He's bringing in a new property manager, someone with fresh perspectives. What? James exclaimed. But you've managed Crystal Mall for years. Apparently, Patricia said bitterly, someone has convinced him otherwise. Someone who saw potential for something better. I said softly, I did. All eyes turned to me. What do you mean? Robert asked. I took a steadying breath before I continued. I opened Sweet Heritage. I met Marcus at a seminar. He saw potential in my ideas, not just for a bakery, but for modernizing retail spaces. Patricia let out a sharp laugh. You, a baker with grand ideas. Yes, I said, sliding a folder across the table. These are proposals I've worked on with Marcus for over a year. Ideas for transforming Crystal Mall into a modern destination. James opened the folder, his eyes widening. Community spaces, seasonal festivals. Emma, this is amazing. Ridiculous. Patricia scoffed. Marcus would never. I already have, Marcus said, stepping into the room. Patricia's face drained of color. Mr. Sterling, I did. Emma owns 51% of Sterling Retail Properties Mall division, including Crystal Mall, Marcus announced. The room went quiet. Patricia looked stunned. Robert choked on his wine. It's impossible, Patricia sputtered. Emma has raised mall revenues by 40% in 1 year, Marcus said. Her strategies are reshaping retail. Patricia whispered, Are you taking my job? No, I said firmly. You're being promoted to Regional Operations Director for our expansion, assuming. I added, you can work professionally with me. Patricia's shock slowly gave way to grudging acceptance. I may have misjudged you. You definitely did, I replied. The question is, what will you do now? As we left, James squeezed my hand. I should have stood up for you sooner. Yes, I said, smiling, but what matters is what comes next. As we drove home, a quiet reflection settled over me. Patricia had been humbled, but questions lingered in my mind. Could her newfound acceptance of me endure beyond the reach of circumstance? Would it mean more or less because it had been spurred by necessity rather than genuine change? The next day, herald of fresh challenges, news of the management shifts swept through the mall, transforming my daily interactions. Some employees greeted me with respect, others with nervous glances that hinted at their fears about the future. Yet beneath the surface, there was a growing energy, the buzz of something new and promising taking shape. Patricia, meanwhile, had taken a week to process the upheaval. When she returned, it was with a surprising fervor for the new initiatives, though her motivation seemed more about proving herself to Marcus than embracing the vision. Still, it was progress. 3 weeks later, she appeared at Sweet Heritage before dawn. Her usually immaculate posture was softened by uncertainty, and her designer handbag seemed more like a shield than an accessory. We need to talk, she said simply. I was wrist-deep in Cento, but gestured toward my office. 5 minutes, she waited silently, observing as I finished the delicate lamination process. By the time we sat across from each other, the tension had thickened. Her eyes wandered over the shelves in my office, pausing on my grandmother's recipe book. I can review the expansion plans, she began, her tone uncharacteristically measured. The demographic data for the suburban locations is impressive. I nodded. Thank you. I stayed silent, waiting for her to say what she had really come to say. Her fingers worried at the pearls around her neck. Finally, she spoke, her voice wavering. I owe you an apology. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear her out. When James introduced you to us, I was prejudiced. I saw someone I believed didn't belong, someone I thought would hold my son back. I couldn't have been more wrong. Her candor caught me off guard, but I simply asked, and now? Now I see someone with vision and character, someone who took every opportunity to retaliate against me and chose grace instead. You've built something extraordinary, and I misjudged you completely. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And what changed your mind? You did, she said softly. Your actions, your resilience, and this place. It's more than a bakery, isn't it? It's a living, breathing example of what retail can become. That's the idea, I replied. Retail isn't just about transactions anymore. It's about creating connections and experiences, about telling stories. Her gaze drifted to the recipe book again. The morning buns, she said, almost to herself. Yes, they remind me of the ones my grandmother used to make. I lost her recipe years ago. I stood and retrieved the book from the shelf. Would you like to see how they're made? Her eyes widened, tears gathering at the corners. You'd share that with me? Family recipes are meant to be shared, I said. If we're going to make this work, we need to start there. That morning, Patricia Chen donned an apron in the Sweet Heritage kitchen for the first time. Her initial attempts at morning buns were far from perfect, uneven filling, lopsided shapes. But when she bit into her first creation, her smile was unedited and genuine. Over the weeks that followed, Patricia's early morning baking sessions became a regular sight. The tenants, initially shocked, began to embrace the idea. Our professional relationship grew, and so slowly did our personal one. Months later, at the grand opening of Sweet Heritage's second location, Patricia was teaching her friends from the country club how to make croissants. Marcus, watching the scene, nudged me with a grin. Never thought I'd see the day. Neither did I replied honestly. The expansion flourished, with 5 new locations opening within a year. Each one reflected the heart of the original Sweet Heritage while embracing Patricia's operational expertise. The morning buns, now a signature item, became the subject of endless speculation among food bloggers. One evening, as we closed the flagship store, Patricia lingered. Emma, I've been thinking about your community initiative, she said. Oh, what if we expanded it? Cooking classes, maybe teaching people how to create their own family traditions. I smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. Her hug was unexpected but warm. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me. As I drove home, I reflected on how life's sweetest triumphs often lie in the connections we forge. Success wasn't just about building a thriving business or proving others wrong. It was about honoring my grandmother's legacy and helping others, even those who resisted, grow. The next morning, Patricia was already at Sweet Heritage when I arrived. I was thinking, she said, her apron dusted with flour, maybe we could create a special pastry for James and your anniversary. Something that tells your story. Our story, I corrected gently. The bitter and the sweet. She smiled, understanding. Yes, all of it. As we worked side by side in the warm glow of the rising sun, the scent of fresh possibilities filled the air. It wasn't just a new beginning for the bakery or the mall. It was a new beginning for us all.